But I was quite interested in helping young people. So when I was 16, I was thrown out. And I was very lucky that I had a brother who was 12 years older than me. So when I was 16, he was 28. And I went and lived with him and went off to university still and did all the things I was going to do. But I've got a real empathy with people who feel that they're not within their own family units, because it lasts a long time with you. I was easily into my 30s before I started feeling sort of comfortable in my own skin, because I had my own family then. But it's very hard not being with your parents, because they're the people who you think you should be with unconditionally. So I had a real empathy for the people who were feeling that way. The last 10 years we worked out it was 24 young people, and over the 30 it's about 56. If you add on the 2 that I've had over December as emergency placements, the number's just gone up. But yeah, so a lot of young people, and most of them, to be fair, still keep in touch in one way, shape or form. We still see lots of them for Christmas. Some still want to come for a sleepover on Christmas Eve and then go off to their own families on Christmas Day. Still get to do a lot of babysitting for the ones that have now got married and have children. they come knocking on the door. And we still see an awful lot of them. And, most of them have done really well. I had a young girl come to me, it must be 12 years ago now, maybe even 13 years ago, and I'm still very close with her. She had been abused by her brother, but her parents had sided with the brother rather than her. She was just finishing her GCSEs. She was in that last school year and had disclosed to school there was a problem. So she came to live with me when she finished her GCSEs. And at the time, they could stay with you for 2 years, because it's changed quite a lot, hasn't it, about how long people can stay with you. And at the time, she could stay with me for 2 years and then would have 2 years in unsupported lodgings. That was the next follow-on step before they could have a council tenancy. And she did her 2 years with me supported, went into unsupported, didn't like where she went, so came back to me as unsupported. And then she got a council placement, and I still see her now. I bought her wedding dress, and she's... I like the relationships you develop with people, and the fact that you can encourage, and a lot of young people don't have aspirations. Now, I find that really difficult, because we've got 5 children, and all of ours, as soon as they hit 17, it was like, oh, I can have driving lessons now, oh, I can buy a car now, or now I can go to college, and now I can go to university, or now I'm 16, I can get a Saturday job. There was they always knew what was going to come next. A lot of these young people don't know what's going to come next, and just kind of tend to lurch from universal credit payment to universal credit payment without thinking about what could come after that and what they could achieve as people. And I think having 5 of my own, when they got to that age group, I think it really helped having young people come in who actually saw a different kind of setup, a different way of thinking, a different way of seeing where they could be or what they could do, and a kind of what a different normal was to what they'd experienced. And I think giving young people faith in themselves, self-confidence, giving them the ability to have that aspiration and help them think they can achieve it is the best thing you can do for them, because anyone can just put a roof over their head. I think when you come across someone who isn't a great communicator, that's probably the most challenging. But at some point along the way, you find what suits that young person's way, really. You find the best way to communicate, especially if you've got people who've got ADHD or autism, who find communication or spatial awareness and empathy with other people's feelings difficult. I think that can be quite challenging, because you have to not react to it. It's just that young person, and you find the way to communicate with them that makes them comfortable. Yeah, you can find people, they come and they've only got a couple of pair of pants and a couple of t-shirts. Usually it's always in a black bag or a carrier bag. You don't have very many well-prepared young people, especially if they've been sofa surfing for weeks, which can often be the case, because it's so difficult finding placements because we've got so few hosts now. A lot of young people leave their home and literally sofa surf for weeks, so naturally lose a lot of their stuff along the way and don't know where it is. They're usually very shy, quite nervous, not sure what to expect. And I suppose if their experience has been one of rejection and not achieving much, they wonder what's going to happen when they come to me. But I don't know, it's just about making people feel at home and at ease, isn't it? Making sure you're open, available, easy to communicate with, and leave it up to them to decide the pace that needs to go at to make them comfortable. You've normally had a meeting with them for an hour or two, further down the line when they've come to view the house and look at our home and look at our family structure to see if they think it would suit them. So you've got a fair idea of what they're like with how they've communicated with you during that kind of 1.5 to 2 hour window. But generally after going to bed and then getting up the next day, I think the next day is usually the day when you really start to get to grips with what people are like. I think there's a stigma attached to young people who have drug, alcohol, or have issues they've had with the police or with their behaviour. But, it's just been a bad choice, hasn't it? It doesn't mean they've got to be that person for the rest of their lives. We've had lots of young people who've had criminal records, who've been rehabilitated offenders, who have been completely drug dependent, have alcohol issues, schizophrenic, bipolar, ADHD. But they're still nice young people. You just find your way to communicate with them. And they all need a chance. You can't expect to do this and expect to have a perfect young person walk through the door who's going to follow your rules. That just won't happen. To be fair, I probably start off quite strict and say this is how it goes here and this is my expectation. And to be fair, I don't expect anything of the young people that I wouldn't have expected of from my own children. And the only thing I ask of them is always to tell me the truth and never to take anything that doesn't belong to them. And they're not really very hefty rules to follow, are they? But and as time goes on and you develop relationships with the young people, then how they interact with you and your family develops, and how the more freedom they have, and because you get trust in each other. So we help with money management. So we'll talk about what important bills are, and especially when they're getting towards where they're moving on, what their priorities should always be, because that isn't always what they know. It doesn't come naturally. Most, relatively speaking, if you are a 16 to 18-year-old who's earned money and you're living with your parents, your priority is to buy the next pair of trainers that you fancy. With them, it's about whether they've got food, whether they've got gas, whether they've got electric, whether they have to contribute to their rent. So I think that's quite difficult for a lot of young people. So we do that. We look at cooking, shopping. Usually the young people who live with me, they cook on a Wednesday. And they can invite someone over for supper, so they look for the recipe, I buy the ingredients, they do the cooking and have someone over to cook for, and they cook for us as well. And it teaches them something different every week then, and lets them think that it's their home because they're having someone come to visit them and they're doing something for someone. I think there's a stability. I think that they need to know that their feet are on solid ground, that whatever goes on where they are, they're not going to get moved on again, because we can't get rid of our own children that easily, can we? I'd quite like to have been like 5, but at times, you've just thought, why did I do this? But you can't just say to your own children when you haven't behaved, so you've got to go. And I don't understand anyone who could be a host who would do the same thing, but they haven't followed the rules exactly, so they need to go. You need to find out why and what will stop them from doing it again, and say to them, if we do it again, then there are consequences. I'm a big believer in sort of carrots and sticks and consequences, and everybody's behaviour and choices and things they do as a consequence. But I think it's important when they come into a new environment that it's a completely clean slate. Yes, we get our document that tells them what their history is, but that's their history. And there's been probably an awful lot of things that have gone in their lives that have created those events that have become documented. So I think it's, you really need to be open-minded. I think there's a lot more people now who have mental health or drug or alcohol issues. I think there's definitely a lean towards that being the reason why people don't want to house them, or why people don't want them in their homes, as opposed to, I suppose, quite a while back, there were issues like that young girl that couldn't be resolved, but as opposed to it being about a behavioural thing that people just didn't want to accept. But somebody's got to deal with them for them. And I think, when people have got those sort of problems, particularly young people, if you don't give the opportunity to put it right, it just carries on, doesn't it? It just is cyclical. I don't know, tell me a 16-year-old who hasn't done something stupid. Doesn't make them a bad person, it's just a bad choice. Easy to communicate, happy to support. I think always being honest. Never say anything to their support worker, their social worker, their PA or any of the other institutions that you haven't had a conversation with them about first, because your relationship is the one that has to be the most trusting. It's really rewarding. You won't find anything else you could do that you would get better results from. Develop great relationships, and to see a young person come and live with you who is unconfident, unmotivated, and feeling a bit lost, and leave with a clear direction about where they want to be going. Doesn't always have to be clear. I mean, most people have many careers now, don't they? And there's nothing wrong with trying something and it not being the right thing and trying something else. So I don't think they have to make their life decisions while people are with you. But knowing that they know where they're going, at least for the next 12 months, is great. That they're safe, that they can be content in their own skin, that they feel valued, and that they can have an aspiration. And they go off like that, as opposed to how they arrived, is the best thing you could do for anybody. It's really, you just can't beat it, really. I don't think there's a lot more you could do that's as rewarding, to be honest.